You're listening to the Headless WP podcast, where we discuss all things Headless WordPress. The Headless WP podcast is a production of the WP Engine Developer Relations team. If you're interested in more content on Headless WordPress, check out developers.wpengine.com for blog posts, tutorials, videos, and more. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Headless WP podcast. I am Jeff Everhart, joined by my always stoked co-host, Fran Agulto. And we have with us as a guest today, Kirk Schwenkler. Kirk is a solutions architect for the developer platform at Cloudflare. And lots of our architecture at WP Engine uses Cloudflare in different ways, as I'm sure many other tech companies do as well. So we wanted to have Kirk on to unpack some of the interesting things that Cloudflare can do for you and your projects. So Fran, Kirk, how's it going?
It's doing real good. I'm happy to be on here. I've been working with you guys for almost all of the 7 years I've been at Cloudflare, and I'm super excited to be on.
Oh, wow, nice. So you're like our solutions architect.
Yeah. I definitely was on the account at one point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Neat. Oh, wow. Then you probably honestly know more about how some of that stuff works behind the scenes.
Yeah, seriously.
Always sure. Always new innovations here. So
yeah. Because I'll look at some of those architecture diagrams and like I'm sort of like a back of the front end, front of the back end dev, and I'm just like, whoa, man, okay, little over my head there. But yeah, so Kirk, thanks again for coming on. You know, one of the things that we always just like to ask our guests as the first kind of opening question is like, before we get into all the technical details, if you just want to give us a little bit of background, you know, what did your path look like to get to working for Cloudflare?
Yeah, no, happy to get into that. So I think like a lot of people at Cloudflare, certainly like a lot of, the leadership, I was definitely working on computers from when I was really young. You'll always hear those stories from them. Yeah. And I remember the green screen and the orange screen computers, we were an orange screen family actually. And, but those really old school things, like basic MS-DOS. And then, so I did work on that from a pretty young age. I did, just kind of the, sort of working around town for people with their websites and stuff in the 90s. And I did get to study computer science at Rutgers, which has a great program just not far at all from where I grew up. So that was pretty convenient.
Awesome. And that's in New Jersey, right?
That's in New Jersey, right?
New Jersey.
You're native East Coaster. Me too.
Yeah. Yeah. So I grew up out there in a place not too far from where Rutgers is. Went to school there. And, they had a really old fashioned computer science program. They literally would use chalkboards a lot of the time. And they drive you crazy in the first course, like all the tests, like, oh, that hello world didn't have tests. Like, what did you do? Why did you do it? So, we learned a lot about just like kind of being rigorous and stuff like that. And I think it was a good way to get education. And then from there, I did take a big detour and and I ended up doing work in finance and consulting, which was a lot of work going on in that at the time. Like after the financial crisis, there were lots of people trying to change a lot of stuff in their businesses. And that was really interesting. And I did that for several years. And then, one of the reasons I got out of it was I heard about what Cloudflare was doing. And the thing that Cloudflare, we'll get into the developer platform, but the original here is this Anycast network. And in like 2014 or something, when someone mentioned that to me, that they built this Anycast DDoS network, that was pretty interesting because, we talked about that and people said you'd never kind of get that stable. You'd always have route contention and BGP leaks. How would you ever really do that? And then by that point, Cloudflare had like 50 data centers by the time I heard of it. I'm not like,
oh, wow.
And then I found out about that and ended up getting this job here and kind of changing career paths. And then we've launched all kinds of other cool stuff, on top of that network over the years.
Yeah, cool. Well, that maybe is a good just jumping off point. And this isn't one of the questions we've got written down, but I might just like, could you unpack the DDoS stuff, like the Anycast network for our users? Because I think that might have been my first introduction to Cloudflare, was the idea that you could like, throw your DNS up there and it would sort of just mitigate all these DDoS attacks and stuff.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So probably the best way to explain it is like, when you're sending attacking traffic, you have to think about like what control they have. They don't control unless it's a really bad day. They're not controlling the internet switches and routers. They can't actually command level 3 or wherever else to send your traffic at a Cloudflare data center or at a non-profit site you don't like and hammer it. what they can control is this IP address that they target it to. They have to ask the internet nicely to deliver it.
Okay.
And that's like the context that we're operating in. Once you're outside that context, you have to call someone in the Pentagon. You don't call me anymore. When you call me, it's about because they're targeting this IP address. So that worked really well in the old days, because for a number of reasons that I kind of alluded to some of them, you really wanted one IP address on one machine. So it could be a big router, it could be a cluster of routers in a data center, but you want it to be somewhere. And that let attackers hammer things, let them figure out a way to just get enough traffic. And then it became this arms race. That's how it was for all the decades I was working in the finance job. Just this, bigger attacks, bigger defenses. Now with Anycast, though, now we break the rules. We change some of those rules I just said. So now that one IP, it's not just one box. Now that IP address is on thousands of boxes. So when the attacker puts the destination on their attack, they don't know where it's going to go, and they can't control where it's going to go, because we said they can't actually control that. They can only control the routing layer, or the addressing. So that worked really, really well. It splits up the DDoS attacks and makes it much easier for us to defend it. Now we don't have to defend one location. We just have to build a bigger network than the biggest attacker. And that's a much easier problem to solve.
Okay. Yeah, no, that sounds awesome. That is wild.
That is wild to me.
And it's very... And I don't know. And I've been on the like bad end. I mean, just in the WordPress space. I mean, WordPress gets has its exploits, I guess.
Sure.
Any what do they call them? Like the script kiddie people, where you can go and probably download some Python program and be like, run WordPress. And then it just does all the things. But I've definitely been on the receiving end of some of those at different times, and like having to respond to them is always difficult. And so having that as a piece of your infrastructure already handled for you is just amazing. Like I can remember the first time I really delved into like server management and sort of DevOpsy stuff. There was a while where I hosted all my websites on just AWS EC2 instances, and like everything had a single IP address.
Oh, you did?
Literally every time that I would, and I think I had to pay for that too, like to have.
Okay.
I'm sure you did.
Whatever static IP.
You would have, but they would have natted you.
They would have natted,
yeah. And man, and every time like I'd spin up a new thing, like somebody would come along and just pound my XML RPC API, and like it was like they just had something, some script out there running, waiting for new sites to come online.
I remember the very first time I did this on the cable modem. I got in the cable modem in my father got one in 1998. And my friend who was like the tech guy, he came in, he said, well, you have to make sure to put this router in. It's different from the dial-up. Like don't plug the computer just into that. It's really like, what? Why wouldn't I? So he's like, all right. And he brought over, something pretty old. Like at that time, it's like a Pentium 1, and he did it. He plugged it right into the cable modem, and like you would just watch it die in front of your eyes. It would just get hacked in front of your eyes, and that's what would happen. Because that was before the script kiddies attacked WordPress. You used to be able to get right into the operating system. You can find all kinds of stuff about the weaknesses in 1990s like OS stacks. Things are much better today, but like
that's wild. Now I'm just thinking back to all the times like, I don't know, just the internet in the late 90s. And most people had not that they have any idea what they're doing now, but like certainly at that time, like the gap between the average consumer's technical ability
and the gap between the hardware. I mean, that's the reality. That like when Microsoft, I'm a Microsoft guy. When Microsoft moved to the Windows NT kernel, things improved dramatically. And when Microsoft did separate kernels for the consumer hardware, it was awful. And that's my opinion.
And I feel like as far as like, now you said you were at Cloudflare when there was like 50, but data centers. Now, as it today stands, Kirk, how many points of presence does Cloudflare have in their CDN network?
Yeah, so the number that I use, sorry, it was a judder there. But I think the number I always use is over 200. So we have 200 cities that we have points of presence in. And then, there's some stuff in the blog about how we treat like actual data center deployments, and now it's less about new areas because we have so many. So that's actually the number that I'm always using. And it's kind of, once it got so big, it became, almost irrelevant.
Irrelevant.
The point is that we want to get, our edge network within 100 milliseconds of basically everybody. That's the goal here. So, it's pretty easy to do that in just a couple big metro areas, and you'll see that with traditional clouds are always doing that, and you'll see that with also when upstarts are always coming up into the CDNs. Some of them are perfectly good, but you will see that these upstart CDN vendors really concentrate on those big metro areas for thousand logistical reasons. So our with having those 200 points of presence, we're able to be within 100 milliseconds of basically everyone.
Wow.
I forget the latest statistic that management's using. I don't want to misquote it, but we have a statistic out there that's impressive around it. That's what we're able to do now. And that's where, I think some of the exciting capabilities come in from workers, as I've been excited to go into this role focusing on that. And if we can build, compute close to basically everyone, it opens up a lot of new possibilities about how do you render a web page? How do I choose my stack for my application? It opens up a lot of new ideas.
And can we unpack a couple of these terms just for our listeners real quick? So I think most people are familiar with what a CDN is, right? Yeah. Content delivery network. It sits close to people, serves these static assets. So how would you conceptualize that versus the edge? Are they the same thing? Are they different manifestations of the same thing?
Yeah. So I would say the CDN is a core technology that you need to deploy somewhere. And then I'm going to kind of draw this distinction between clouds and the edge. So cloud, I would think of it's a dozen metropolitan areas, and you'll see all kinds of services this way.
Like US East 1 in Northern Virginia, US West 1.
Then you have the edge. CDNs, from the very beginning, when people like Akamai were pioneering CDNs, they knew that a lot of it needed to be at that edge. It needed to be truly close to everywhere. But I would say it's different. CDNs are about delivering content. So you have certain applications that have this need to do what? To deliver content. And the CDN helps you to do that. But you might have applications that don't need to deliver. Maybe they only take data in. There's probably something listening here for Zoom's quality control. I'm sure they have something. It's taking data in. It's not delivering data, but that still needs to live at the edge. So I'd say they're tightly related, really tightly related historically. But there's other capabilities that also benefit. Like a CDN probably needs to be at the edge to be really good. No one really. Again, it's hard to build it in just 5 metros and get business. But you can build all kinds of other things at the edge: SSL termination, data collection, security features, in addition to delivering those videos and images and things that we do through that CDN content delivery.
Okay. Yeah, cool. And so you said that you're pretty much your goal at Cloudflare is to be within 100 milliseconds of all of humanity. That's pretty crazy.
That's the goal there. Yeah. There's some challenging internet conditions in some places, and some people just look at the infrastructure, but there's so much going on with the parts of the world that are wireless first. There's a lot of new people getting to that every day as our network's also expanding.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So. Yeah, and the thing is, and as you know, Kirk, it's funny in our for Jeff and I and the community that we play in daily with the Jamstack decoupled, composable, whatever you want to call it, where you're essentially driven by consuming APIs with a JavaScript front end. There's this kind of buzzword in our community right now, in the Jamstack dev community, called rendering at the edge, or pushing everything to the edge. So instead of just static files that we serve on a CDN, we can run actual code to manipulate responses in order for better personalization. That's a huge use case for it. That's one, But with all that being said, Kirk, could you describe, because I'm a big fan of Next.js. Jeff, you could hate me.
No, I'm coming around, man. I mean, it is. I like
Vercel, who's the company that's behind Next.js and is their own platform. I am aware that they use Cloudflare workers on their for their edge functions. Could you kind of unpack a little bit of that, of how that works at the edge when you're actually running code logic to dynamically manipulate responses for a user?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So overall, ever since we started doing, personalized web pages, we've seen these two models, and I think of them as the PHP model on the one hand and the JavaScript model. Yeah. And I know PHP can actually do a lot of stuff. It's a good language.
I love it. And I love that PHP is back around in this nostalgic way after so many years.
The traditional one that me and everyone is thinking of is when you linked it up probably to an old version of Apache and you loaded in this template, and the template would know how to pull template objects from your SQL database, and you'd set up this other layer in between. But the point of that is that would render the personalized content on the server. We do everything on the server. And way back in the day, people did everything like this. You can do an e-commerce shop like this. It's not fun, but they used to go this way. And every post would go up and it would re-render the page. And then the shopping, would put a 2 in the corner. And then you click to the shopping cart, et cetera. There's a lot of downsides to that. And you can even see as I'm just explaining it there, every time I'm saying something, we're going back and forth. We're getting a whole new page. And it's very, very slow. So now we've moved to this JavaScript model where you get a template and then you call back to the server for what you need using, when they made the XML HTTP request API, that's like the dawn of this, the dawn of Web 2.0.
And we've got spas, everything, side render.
So now you have both of these options. So what I think folks are doing with Vercel and workers functions at the edge, however they consume them, is they're coming up with this pretty elegant third option, which is, okay, I didn't like having to send all that data over to the client with PHP. But running it at the client also has a lot of challenges. You have a really complicated API service you have to set up, which I think people it's easy to understate how hard that is. When you have all of that, and the client has to get to it, and they have to auth it, and then the attackers can get the auth tokens because they're the client too. And with workers at the edge, now we can have an interesting middle ground, and this is often how technologies go. We choose the poles until we can do it, and now we see, hey, I can render all the content 100 milliseconds away from everybody. So now I can personalize things without giving the users all of these credentials to the backend. And I can really find kind of a hybrid model. And that's what you're seeing with these server-side rendering frameworks that people are running through the functions product on us and on other things. You can also kind of homebrew it on Cloudflare. We have libraries that help you to do this. Oh. And I think that's a pretty exciting model to go into, because again, you always have to make this trade-off somewhere. But you also, you're always going to use an intermediary. Like, you're using us or one of our competitors. You're doing security and stuff there. If we really can give you a better one. It's not just you're moving up and down on the curve. We can help it get better because you can find a lot of synergies there.
Mm-hmm. And so with the workers platform, is that only because I know I've seen a lot of the frameworks. I guess Next.js obviously does it in some way, but I feel like we just had on Daniel Rowe from Nuxt and Remix, and I think more and more things are baking themselves so that they can be deployed directly to Cloudflare workers. And I would assume that's all some sort of JavaScript runtime. Do you have other runtimes? Could I write PHP stuff there? And
PHP? So that's a great question. So JavaScript is definitely the core of what we're doing on Cloudflare workers, and that works for applications like this. It's usually really good. TypeScript is also supported just because our tool chain supports that now. Okay. So what Cloudflare Workers runs on is V8, which supports what's called WebAssembly. So just like your laptop can run any programming language by using its assembly to execute instructions, Workers knows how to do something similar, and that lets you port things from other languages like PHP onto it.
Oh, that's cool.
But it ends up being, so there's I think a lot of work for everyone, for the community to do on the tool chains. This is kind of a new idea, but you'll see we have some really well-tread examples around Rust and around C and COBOL. We have an example. Was a big fan of some of our executives. Everyone thinks it's very interesting to help people with these older applications, and they really wanted that. So we do have a tool chain for that.
Dude,
I'm going to write COBOL on the edge after this.
Yeah, me too, man.
Yeah.
Although I'll bet you what? Somewhere there's somebody making just piles and piles of money writing COBOL for a bank.
Probably.
People told me in the 90s, you'd be a fool. They won't be doing that when you're in a career. And I love this job. Don't get me wrong, but it's still a good job, the COBOL programmers.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. And that just makes me kind of wonder, obviously we've done the JavaScript stuff. There's a really good example. Somebody just made WordPress work entirely in WebAssembly. So you can spin up the whole WordPress server side. Yeah, the WordPress playground is it's WebAssembly.
Oh, that's
so it kind of makes me wonder, I kind of want to go mess around and see if we can port that and make that run entirely at the edge, and that would just be an insane.
Yeah, something we'd want to look at, and we're always improving what's called the ABI, essentially the APIs, but now it's a binary interface that you have access to. So that's the technical term for us making WebAssembly more powerful. So as we run into roadblocks, there's always work going on. We made a big announcement at the end of last year, and more is going to come to make WebAssembly more powerful. We don't want you to have to do a hybrid thing where you have to go back to JavaScript. This has been a thing for languages on difficult target environments for a long time, and it's one of these things that just becomes impractical. I try to steer people, but we're really happy to support more and more native WebAssembly, native Rust, and no JavaScript shims. And then also I'll note though, the V8 interpreter we're using Zoom, but if we were using on the web, our browsers are using that same V8 interpreter. It is extremely efficient. Okay. I'm not an assembly programmer. I haven't programmed assembly for 20 years, but like the engineers tell me you won't out compile V8. So you should use other languages because you have an existing tool chain, because you have an existing expertise. You shouldn't do it because you think you'll be faster than the JavaScript. Because you probably won't.
Gotcha.
It's interesting to me because from a product perspective, and this is kind of like, I'm going to just go off on a side tangent for our third question, Kirk, but I want your opinion. And our product manager for Atlas, Jason Conan, I hope you're listening to this. but in your opinion, Kirk, as far as Jamstack or hosting platforms that are geared toward decoupled driven development like Vercel, like Netlify, like WP Engines, Atlas, do you feel that like if you are to be a valid platform in this ecosystem, you need edge functionality, or else you're going to lose to a competitor, meaning we should slap Cloudflare workers on our Atlas platform is what I'm saying. But Kirk, what is your opinion on that statement that I just made?
Here's what I think. I think there's different applications need the edge more than others. I think that's kind of one thing to think of. You can find things where it's kind of 6 and 1/2 dozen in the other. But the other thing that I has to fly into that though is people usually do want to deploy some type of edge functionality. They usually do want to deploy the WAF. They usually do want to deploy SSL at the edge. And then that probably breaks the tie in most of these cases when you think about it. But I will be very clear, like my job's a solution architect, and I'm always straight with my clients. Like some things it doesn't matter as much. Some applications don't get that much benefit from it. And some applications it's completely existential. You would never survive without being at the edge. So I do always encourage people to find that, and it's something that does have to be considered for certain applications.
Okay, so it kind of feels like you think there will always be sort of a place for like the traditional client server model with our Linux box sitting somewhere. Origin server scenario.
I think so. Like I really love the idea of like the workers supercomputer that the world runs on. I have kind of a whole thing about how like microcomputers and operating systems were a mistake. But I love this idea of just programming the worker's computer and not really thinking about too much and using the worker's APIs, using the cache API, using the KV. And this is what I take clients through. So that's like kind of a sort of an aesthetic opinion that I have more than a practical opinion, honestly. But look, in reality, there's big workloads that you're not going to run up at the edge. Like that's the thing that's happening here. So, it's just going to take too much compute. Cloudflare has a limit of, we need to share all of our resources for everyone. And we need to respond to DDoS attacks, and we need to do things. We're not going to run your training workload for 3 days. So there's these obvious extreme cases that simply are not for our context. Now, it doesn't mean we're not solutioning around them. And indeed, I am very actively working on how we can work with you on that from a go-to-market perspective. So, but we're not going to run it at that edge because it doesn't make any sense. It has to be in one place. There is no distributed compute. Topics for another podcast. You're going to find where you have to do this. And people will always be selling you these kind of supercomputers to run big workloads on. And for everything else, I think we will see. We'll just see kind of what comes up. Can we make a really good cloud database for you that kind of makes those trade-offs in a way that makes sense? Can we help raise the worker's memory limit, which we know is a little restrictive today? Yeah. That's what's going to figure out like how far along we get. And there's always going to be some things where it's just not sensible.
Yeah, well, and that would be my question. Are there like positions that are things that you think like just aren't well suited to the edge?
Yeah, that's what I was
there are complications like that that happen when you decide to go to the edge. And I think like there was a Jeff Delaney video talking about the edge where they're talking about latency or something. And like if you have a centralized database in one region and it's not at the edge, but then somebody connects at the edge, like then it doesn't almost end up making your stuff slower.
Yeah.
I mean, explain any of that stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a couple of things in what you said. It's a really good way to think about it. So first of all, we have to get the data out there. So we have our alpha version of D1, and you can see how we're working through all these speed of light challenges. It's very clear what the challenges are. You have about a 15 milliseconds latency around the world. So there's a clear limitation here. That is a very big number when it comes to operations.
Well, and I feel like if you've solved the speed of light problem, maybe space travel.
So we don't do that. We figure out a very smart way for replication. We figure out a very smart way to use stale data. We do what other people are doing with these data APIs that people are running. And that's where D1 will get to. D1 will get to a place where you're not breaking the speed of light, but you also feel very confident that transaction you committed in New Zealand, you understand what it's doing in New York. And you understand it won't be immediate, but it makes sense. And that's where that is continuing to progress towards. Once that's done, again, it's just the workloads. Yeah.
Okay. Could you explain the D1 product? Because I have a little bit of familiarity, I think, for the KV, which is key value.
What is D1?
Stores,
right? Happy to talk about that. Yeah. So many different workers products, right? And I know all these different acronyms.
That's interesting.
So in this space of how do we get applications to the edge? There's two layers of this. The compute side is it's easier, right? Obviously, it took some amazing engineers a ton of work to get this working the way it is, but it's easy to wrap your head around. Especially, we run V8, we run it on all of these machines, we distribute traffic through ECMP. Not easy, but we do it. With data, though, it's really hard to figure out just where to begin. So right now we're building out more and more of these options to build data at the edge, data that makes sense at 200 data centers with users within 100 milliseconds. So Workers KV has a very extreme set of trade-offs. Workers KV, it's very slow for writes. It takes a minute. A minute might as well be a day in most cases. Very slow. Wow. But it's really fast for reading. So it's incredibly useful. So there's a mechanical reason why it works this way. But by making that trade-off, you get reads with no limits on how often you can read. You get reads at pretty low read latency. And you get local caching all around the world. And that's all really important because we're distributed. And then we have something else that's called durable objects. And that takes a different trade-off. It says, I'm just going to put your data in one place. Everyone else has to get it from me. So those are the two data things that we're building now. So one is locally caching it with a delay. One is everyone has to wait, but they always get it correctly. So we're building these two things around that. D1 is going to be more in the central model, just like any other database. Databases are consistent. If someone else bought the shoes, it knows that they're out of stock. They have to do that. But it's going to support SQL queries. It's also going to support some kind of local caching, which we're still figuring out. But it's going to give you a really interesting way to handle that data. And it will be different from those traditional databases on an old WordPress because it's not just running in one location, and that's core to its design. But yeah, that's something that's an incredibly exciting project we're working on. There's so much that's unknown, even in the design, but we know we want to move towards that.
And it's interesting. And so the limitation on the KV model with it being 1 minute for writes is just because you're going to ensure that everything is written to before. Is that it?
Mechanically, it's about cache invalidation. So they say there's three hard problems in computer science, right? So one of them is cache invalidation. The specific mechanical reason why it works this way is because we just tell every local node to refresh their cache once a minute. And if we don't do that, then we have to invent a signaling mechanism that's global. And now I'm just saying stuff. And now that's not something we would do. You can do. So
Gotcha. No, that's all really interesting.
Yeah, if you look at the way our CDN cache purge works, for example, it's so complicated the way it handles this question.
That's insane.
There's a lot of depth to this stuff.
I know it seems just infinitely complex. And I love the idea that you said yours would be available using SQL queries. I remember I did a deep dive into DynamoDB for a little bit, and it was just that querying whatever they call the querying language or that construct was just really, really difficult to wrap your head around. And on top of that, the structure of it was kind of funky. Is that similar to how the KV works, or is that more just like a document storage, I guess?
You should think of KV more as a document store just because the timing properties are so different. KV does have it has an obscure option about lists, and you can provide filtering options to the list. So you can essentially query the KV database. We have some clients actually doing amazing stuff with this. It's fully supported. It's just sort of hacky. So if you're willing to, if anyone looks at our API, if you look at the KV list API, you can kind of get towards actually doing DynamoDB stuff. But again, there's this big latency thing in the middle, and it's not super the intent of it.
Yeah, because I remember, and it's been a while since I went there, but I remember there was something about like you had to specify what kind of consistency maybe you wanted, like with some of the data in
With
DynamoB. It was like
sure, yeah,
immediate
how
or
does
eventual, or what,
Yeah.
what is important here that I
Yeah.
know is replicated everywhere.
That's how they're dealing with these speed of my line on that is that's how you deal with speed of light trade-offs in big opaque data APIs, right?
Mhm.
That's what they're doing. They're just saying, hey, fetch the data from me. We know that we're global and that they have to deal with all this stuff too. Even no one can do it, break it. So those are their ways of giving you ways to manage those trade-offs. Yeah, it's a good product, and we want to have that type of functionality, on our platform as we move forward.
Yeah, awesome. And I think and we had a couple. So I think we're sort of in this. We had a database question now, and I think we're kind of inside that.
yeah,
So if you could talk about this a little bit, it's
this is interesting.
so what would maybe be the advantages of not doing that, like running a traditional just cloud database instead of something at the edge? I mean, obviously,
Sure.
like it just becomes simpler to model in my
Model,
brain for sure. But
So I think so one example that I give is like, as a big corporation, you're going to eventually you're going to have an accounting database that produces financial statements. You have no benefit from putting that at the edge, and you're going to have I can come up with all the downsides I can think of, and then you can lay awake at night and wonder what ones I didn't think of. It just some things just need to be secure. I think that's one key thing. That's why I bring the example up. I need to just be really secure. Security is number one. It's not even like about hacker security. Like my CFO will go to jail if this leaks. That's bad. So that's number one. I probably want to keep that very much, like lockdown. Two, there's just no point really. It's getting data in. It's not flowing stuff back out. Or if it is flowing it back out, it's flowing it out as in my example, as a statement, as something you're reporting, a huge document you're producing. So it's not doing any of the things that let you benefit from the edge. And you have kind of all the reasons to not want to. Now, I'm not saying literally put that in your basement. I'm saying that one of the big three cloud providers, there's lots of good cloud providers. That's who's going to want to host that application from SAP or whoever, that you're going to put a very specific auth in, and maybe you'll use Cloudflare Access or some other VPN replacement. That's the kind of thing where you wouldn't ever ask for it to be hosted distributed, and would never ask your SaaS vendor about it. It just wouldn't benefit you. It would only raise your risk profile. And there's tons of applications like that. I'm taking that example because it's near and dear to me, but so much in manufacturing, so much in design, so much for all of these companies. It's just not benefit from it.
And if the application itself doesn't serve a geographically distributed audience, again, like does it really
matter?
Yeah. I can remember I worked for an insurance company as a developer for a while, and we made, some amount of internal tools, right? But it was like all those tools were used by people in this one building. So it was, like I just, in that scenario, I'm not sure the overhead is worth, the benefit there.
Yeah. So out of curiosity, and I was just wondering, do you have any experience doing headless WordPress yourself, Kirk? And even if you don't, I was also wondering, like, what would be maybe Jeff, you could also dive into this. What would be a use case for a headless WordPress site using edge function Cloudflare workers? You know what I mean?
I'll give you my answer, which is that my blog is hopelessly out of date and I haven't actually used this, but I see lots of clients doing it, and it's because what you're doing, like the whole point of this is to separate the concerns out, and you have a data API, and now you come back to that design question I mentioned before. Like I could have the clients call my headless CMS, or I could find any number of reasons to put Cloudflare in between. It could be purely for security reason. It could be because I want to pre-render the content. So I think there is lots of ways for edge functions to play with that. But again, there's designers, and there's a designer's perspective that I don't have, which also will give you a lot of answers. That's why people do that.
Yeah, when I don't know, like I'm really interested in the personalization aspects of some of that. And like Vercel does that really nicely.
Very nicely.
You can sort of intercept this request and, like modify whatever, can kind of rewrite those responses. That's a really neat use case for me. I'm just kind of looking at some of the notes we got over here. Yeah.
Yeah, and Cloudflare Workers lets you do all this really flexibly with working on responses and parsing through HTML, placing all the tags that you want to replace.
Yeah.
There's a specific API that does HTML parsing. I think doesn't get quite enough love, and I'm excited to see. Hopefully, the community and other people will build more around that, because we do have some really cool capabilities there to assemble HTML and work through it.
Could you elaborate on that? That does sound really interesting.
that sounds cool. Yeah,
It's
what is that?
called the HTML rewriter API.
I want to look this up right now. Actually.
Yeah, no, that's a great name.
Yeah. So a lot of the time when we do this stuff, people will literally just use, God forbid, a regex, or if you're me, you use string, just to drop content in, right? But for all the reasons why people do sometimes go down the dark road of regexes where it gets so complicated, this gives you, correctly. This gives you some explicit ways to say, I would like to take every div and add padding to it. I'm not so much an HTML guy, but you can see all the different HTML transformations you can make effect with here. Totally. And then mechanically, this also works really efficiently because
cool.
A lot of our features, once you get into them, you realize that you're programming the CDN. And this is an example of it. What I mean by that is you have a gigantic body. You don't have to actually copy that into your worker. You can just let it go through the CDN and all this stuff takes effect. Because Cloudflare's CDN now knows you've told it what to do. You've given it the program tag.
Oh,
okay.
This is a really cool feature that can let you build some customizations around it. The challenge is that none of those front-end frameworks have their APIs built around this.
That was my next question.
That's what I was going to ask.
If I'm using Remix and I'm rendering it on the edge, can I tap into this HTML rewriter API?
It's just It's just another project. It's a project for the community, or maybe we'd be able to prioritize it. It's just something that hopefully we would get towards. It's something that it's like a known. It's a known path. It's not like that mystery around how do we get D1 perfect. Like with certain amount of effort, there could be new frameworks.
It just needs to be done.
Man, this is cool.
Yeah, because that does seem like a really powerful thing. And I could think, if you wanted to be crazy and like roll your own, I don't know, solution around something. And not use a framework, it would be really
well. And that's what we do in practice. When I have people, usually it's when they're doing something really, either they're modifying content or they're building something really specific, and then they do just hand roll it, and it works. It's very performant when you do that.
That's cool. And I'm just taking a look at a couple of these other. So you got like a fetch API. We talked about the KV.
Yeah, web crypto is kind of another example of this kind of thing, where it's just sort of a cool feature. Just shows you kind of the power of workers. It's running on a big security platform. So why wouldn't it have web crypto? And you can do signature signing. I don't really recommend like rolling your own security code, and that even includes like stringing primitives together. I don't just mean that as writing algorithms. But if you're very certain, these are good, these algorithms are correct, and it does give you that surface to build things around.
Okay. And so it looks like I'm looking at this scheduled event API. Is that kind of like a cron job?
Yeah, that's another really cool one in there. So, and when we think about these WordPress in a worker, so cron workers are almost always triggered off of incoming HTTP events. Fundamentally, you're attaching a listener to it's just like programming an old school front end in Java Swing. Because oh my God, it's JavaScript, and that's kind of what you can absolutely do that on this scheduled event listener. You also we're going to be rolling out a queue consumer, which is beta right now. That'll be a new event type. But that's what you'll see. You can build those scheduled events in there.
Okay. I remember that being early on a limitation of like AWS's Lambda. It was really difficult.
Can you do cron jobs on AWS Lambda?
I didn't think so last time I messed with it, but I know that they might have rolled out like,
I think they can now.
I hear people talking about like fat Lambdas now or something like that. And maybe that's another service, but clearly like that, some of that stuff is just way too, like there's too many options and it's overwhelming almost. That's awesome. So you said the durable object, is that D1?
That is the core for D1. So when I said like the fundamental trade-offs, durable object is that one singleton instance, strong consistency, and then that's what D1 gets built off of. But D1 will extend that so that, and the main thing we will extend is so we have a concept of local sharding and caching. So you don't actually have to have every transaction sync. And that's what makes all these other data APIs work in practice. But yes, durable objects is the core of that. And we have some cool examples built around that today. We have a chat room example. We have a game server example where you actually build an application and people interact in the durable object and they all share the data on their web browsers.
Oh, that's really cool.
Clients who build real applications around that. It's also very powerful.
It's really cool.
Awesome. And I'm looking at an R2 product. Could you kind of explain that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So this is something that's very cool for object storage. So, for a lot of our clients, who are either running just a really big website or storing something like game downloads or update files for IoT devices, you end up with tons of data to store. So some other folks in the industry came up with this S3 standard about a decade ago. It is a good standard. They did a good job on it. And this really solves a big problem. Like when I make a lot of analogies back to setting up web pages. It helps you think about workers. The other thing you'd remember if you've ever done like an Apache is you get to this one sketchy spot where it's like, well, take this one directory, make it open to the world.
Yes.
Really the whole world is behind a web server. Make sure you don't put anything else in there. Don't put a symlink in there. It's so dangerous, and there have been so many horrible bugs based on this over the years, just from like directory traversal, just inserting slashes and stuff, to like actual hacks, file system. Object storage just takes that all away. It gives you a different abstraction to deal with your data, where it no longer has this like OS directory structure concept. So to me, that's like the core innovation here. It's just turning it's taking it again from a laptop scaled up to run a website to know I'm programming a global supercomputer. And of course I would tell it to store that X this way. Why wouldn't I? Why would I think about a file system? I don't even want to think about a file system locally. You don't anymore. No one even sees C:/. Anyway, tangent. But that's very powerful, and we're happy to have it on our platform now, to have our own object storage offering, to be API compatible with what you get off the other cloud providers.
Okay, that's cool.
All right.
That's neat. That kind of makes me, and so you said that's kind of comparable to S3, right? Because it uses the S3 API.
Very much.
S3 buckets.
Yeah, because we actually have, now that makes me wonder, we have a plugin that is called Offload Media. And now I'm just looking and seeing if we actually support Cloudflare.
Oh yeah, we should work on that if it doesn't.
Yeah.
Which plugin is it, Jeff?
This is Offload. So it doesn't look like it's on there. Yeah,
so
we
can definitely, you can certainly follow up with me after this week.
Okay, yeah, definitely. We'll do that because like it supports Amazon S3. Yeah, and as long as it supports the S3 API, it should be
just a very simple change.
Really quick to add. That's cool. Yeah, I'll definitely, I'm going to throw that over to that product team that works on that. Yeah. And see what they think. Because that would be cool to offer some people additional functionality there. Okay. Especially if people are using Cloudflare too, because like if they're already using it, it sucks to have to go have stuff spread across a bunch of the different cloud providers.
Yeah, so we were happy to give people that on-platform option. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you kind of mentioned another thing, and you left some notes on some of our questions, which I definitely appreciate. Because I'll be honest, like a lot of this I think is very much not in Fran and I's wheelhouse in terms of like the app development that we've done, but it's awesome to listen to it. So you mentioned something called service bindings. Elaborate on what those are?
Yeah. So the reason I brought this up for your question here is, I think one of the big benefits of doing something headless is the separation of concerns, and a lot of developer innovations are actually workplace productivity and workplace like politics innovations, and I don't mean it in a bad way. So if we can help our products work the way teams are organized, life is easier. And if you have to have one team committing across 3 repositories or vice versa, things can get pretty confusing, and you can't hire the right people who know what to. So I think, to me, when I look at something like headless, that's kind of one way of doing this, to say, all right, you guys are going to write the backend, you're going to write it to a spec, someone will consume it. Maybe it's a space iPhone, who cares? Just write the API. That's awesome. That's how I was always taught to do. That's literally what I was instructed to do. And I still think that's the way to go. I think, writing to a spec this way. Service bindings now is another tool we have to do that. So if you were writing an application in Workers, you used to have to upload one big worker to us with whatever you had. You had an authentication function, and then a core application, and then you had some like designs, something a designer worked on. Maybe it's like the environment, the UI. You would have to bundle those all in one worker before you gave it to us. So that's right, because I said I want to work with your workflow and help with office politics. Now I'm saying you have to have these 3 teams work together. They have to have all their arguments out in the Git workflow before they can give it to Cloudflare, and that's no fun. So service bindings lets you upload all 3 of those independent pieces. And as each one gets updated, it creates a new bundle at the edge. So if a team pushes up the new auth function, you upload a new auth worker. Now, if you have a new UI generator function, but the auth is the same, you upload a new UI worker. And they all call to each other. And you can see the API we use for this. It's the same fetch API. So, on the one hand, like I from like my Turing machine standpoint, it makes no difference. What do you mean? It's the same code. Who cares? But from the real world, it's such a big difference in how you actually contribute your code and how you can actually get work done. So we're always really excited about things like that. It's kind of subtle, but it's really, really powerful and enabling for bigger applications.
Okay.
Yeah, that does seem really interesting.
That is cool.
Because I mean, it especially like you said, like the separation of concerns and all that. I mean, it seems like it sort of allows you to break down what ends up being a monolithic bundle into sort of, I don't know. I'm going to say microservices.
Yeah, microservices.
Exactly. It's a lot like the monolith microservices thing, right? That's another. It's the same debate, just in a different context. Yeah.
That is cool.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna check out.
I'm gonna mess around
with
with
Cloudflare stuff.
Yeah. It was cool. Those came out just towards the end of last year, and yeah, it's pretty powerful.
Okay. Well,
it does seem like you also just have like, and again, just this is for we don't see a ton of people do this as much anymore. Looks like you have a product called Workers sites as well. That's for deploying static applications. Yeah,
that's actually going to end up getting rolled into Pages, which becomes the
Cloudflare Pages. I've heard of Cloudflare Pages. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Pages is our. It's a lot of similar to what you'll see. People like Vercel and Netlify have their own kind of value add on top of it. Pages is like it's in that Spring. It's built as a Jamstack product, and so we sell that directly to clients who are interested in kind of a lighter Jamstack experience. Great product. And then we use that technology for our partnerships where it makes sense as well. It's the core of that underpins the way we work with people. But yeah, this is something that we sell direct.
Do y'all have a free tier on that? I want to mess around and deploy to it. Is there a sandbox?
I'm going to look it up. We usually do. So I'm pretty sure we do.
Oh yeah, this is essentially a Jamstack hosting thing. Yeah,
that's nuts. Does it have? I mean, what kind of functionality does that have? Then?
There's a free tier.
GitHub integration, all that same stuff.
So it has Git integration, it has workflows, it has different deployment options. It has a way to put access automatically in front of your websites.
Okay.
But yeah, the main thing is, hey, instead of using Wrangler to build your website, we can just link Pages directly up to to your repository and have kind of a different workflow. So yeah, I'm on the enterprise sales team. Usually that's more of my pitch than like, hey, it's Jamstack, but it is. And if you're from a consumer standpoint, it is absolutely a Jamstack product that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think of it as like there's certain use cases, whether or not they've heard of that term, where this is really beneficial. And like everything else, there's some where it sort of doesn't matter. But this has been a great product for us because it makes it easier to consume Workers. And then you get all those great features just right from the GitHub repository.
Okay. And so, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's sort of, so Pages and Workers are like the same thing. Can I combine them?
Pages
uses Workers, right? Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. Gotcha.
Pages functions are just Workers scripts, and that's your gateway into that. And then the rest of Pages is a wrapper around R2 and some other stuff.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. Are you looking? Cool. I'm looking at but yeah, it's essentially. What you would get from Atlas or Netlify. Yeah, it'll
deploy
just connect to my GitHub repo. And I can just deploy my front end code and have an environment variable. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
No, it's good. And again, we're happy to build this. We're also happy for the players that are doing their own value add takes on it from Vercel and Netlify.
Yeah.
All kinds of stuff out there. So.
Yeah, I think rising tide lifts all boats. Yeah. It's really cool to see.
100%. Yeah.
Let people have more options for sure.
And I've always said this, like the web is a big place, especially with the way we create and deploy sites. There's room for all of us, and in the space. It's not, it might be a little competition, but like you said, Jeff, a rising tide raises all ships.
Yeah,
this is what's great about the web.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, I mean, it'll be cool. I'll bet you one day somebody's like built their own Vercel equivalent on top of Pages stuff.
Yeah.
Like AWS, and instead of using AWS, that'd be really cool to see. Cool. So we've got just a couple minutes left. I know we talked a little bit about WordPress. Is that something you've ever used at all?
Honestly, I have never used it myself. I don't think. I've helped a million clients with it. I'm very familiar with like the old school kind of security.
HP,
yeah.
No, my blog that I wrote myself, I kind of like did my own version like it in Python Flask. And that's what I did the last time applying for the job at Cloudflare. The last time I did my own programming. That's what I ended up doing just because it was a little bit deeper into the internals. But yeah, it it's just personal preference. Because I don't.
Yeah, for sure. And so one of the questions that I usually ask people is like, if you could wave a magic wand and make WordPress, like some change to WordPress to make it better for headless developers, like what would that be? And so maybe my question to you is, for someone who obviously works directly with clients, you do a lot of, I guess maybe work with people who are doing decoupled stuff. Is there, something that you see there that, like, I don't know, works really well for them, like a benefit that maybe we could take back and
a good question, Jeff.
Grow to our product teams and say, oh, if we had something, build this.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't have like an FR off the top of my head. I'll say that overall, the benefit is that they're trying to work in a more decoupled way so that everyone can focus on their core kind of value. That's like where I see clients saying, hey, we're moving to headless. So I think it's just, tying to that in like marketing and in like services offerings. Honestly, like if I'm going to put on my Kirk like VC hat, I think the number one difficulty here is the services side. Because, if we're saying, hey, let's push out headless, like it's kind of, I think, an attractive pitch. So let's take this old app. It's been a nightmare. Let's move it to this headless. Okay. I love it, but I've done enough of these to know that it's a services sell, and we have to figure out who's going to come in and understand that old app and help to rewrite it. So I guess that's kind of my comment on it. I don't technically I don't really have so much to add, but I will say that can be hard to scope deals, and a lot of people stay with what they know because they can't get through that. Most people stay.
That's very true. I think when we talk with our sales architects and stuff like that, they say the same thing, that it is hard to scope the deals, and a lot of times people are more comfortable with what they know. So I stick with that.
100%. All right. Well, we got just a few minutes left. Kirk, I always ask this question on every podcast. So besides nerding out on Cloudflare and technology and stuff, what are your hobbies, man? What do you do to decompress outside of tech?
Yeah. So I do spend a lot of time outdoors doing hiking, and I do some nature photography. Which I eventually need to get back up on the internet. I have so many photos sitting around on the computer, but like especially for the pandemic, I've had a lot of ability to like be kind of flexible with work and get out. I spent a lot of time up in by Lake Tahoe over the past couple of years.
That place is rad. Yeah,
did a cross country road trip in this Sprinter van that I owned for a while.
Oh, what you did van life?
It was very cool. Yeah, I did it I feel like if it's like the life, maybe you have to do it for longer. But I used it just kind of to get out there. It was just such a good way, to get out to the parks, get some photos in, just go to sleep right there.
And did you? I'm just kind of curious because there's a whole community and culture. I bet they might even have their own Discord server of people who like live van life, but they customize their sprinters, man.
Mm-hmm. They did it. I ended up cheating. I got one from Winnebago. I cheated. The way to do it is to get the beater and then start from the ground up. What I'll say is, like, honestly, I mean, you need to have so much skill to do that. And I'm okay. I'm okay handy, but I don't know the electrical, especially. I don't touch electrical.
Oh yeah.
The people who do that, they get such a cool rig that they're just gonna love it. And I will tell you, when you buy one new, it's like the opposite. It's the new car experience. Like, nothing against any of these brands, but like everything's awesome. And then like suddenly you have to fix stuff. And then it's like, oh, well, since I didn't build this, where is it?
Yeah.
And so you end up kind of back at the same spot a few years in.
Oh man,
that's crazy. I've watched some van builds go horribly wrong. Obviously, it's like you're in a van and people like, I watched one where they just put a bunch of tile and just had weight. Like, because I mean, the stuff that's
they put tile in their van.
Yeah, so they love it. The backsplashes.
Yeah, it does. But it was also just like, at what point, like, because if you've like, and I don't know if the stuff in your van or RV is the same, but it's like, it's usually lighter composite materials. Like, it's all made to be really light. People went out, like, they ripped all the original stuff out, and they're like, just went and got any fridge down from Home Depot, and like, giant butcher block counters, and like all of a sudden I'm just like, your gas like MPG just probably went down.
Oh god.
Oh, it's not even. Yeah, exactly. The other thing that I'd always keep in mind is like, when you stop the car, all the stuff's going to want to come flying at your head. And like sprinters do have like the seats are pretty bulky because they're cargo vans, and like they come up over the top of your head, but like you don't want stuff flying around. And that's what I think about when I see some of these designs. I'm like, bro, like you didn't take that like on the 101 and do a sudden stop.
A chandelier.
Chandeliers on.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's funny
really
too
cool.
now because I'm sure, Kirk, you were remote, right? You don't have to go into the Cloudflare office if you didn't want to, right? Are you
I
fully
don't.
remote?
I'm back in this area these days just because we've had a lot of in-person client events and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, Cloudflare's gotten pretty good at hybrid work. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And
Awesome.
and I think the last, because I'm looking at your bullet points. Did you used to be in a
Yeah.
band?
Yeah, that was the one. Yeah, I used to play in all kinds of musical things when I was in school. I actually had like a second degree in music, and I might have even gotten it full time.
Oh, that's dope, man.
My brother's actually like a professional musician down in UC San Diego, but I went on this track.
Wow.
But yeah, I used to play.
So many tech people are musicians.
Yeah, I don't know if
I need to see some data. Like,
me too.
Because everybody we talk to, I play the guitar and a couple other instruments and stuff. And like, I don't know what it is, but I guess maybe like we liked it and figured we needed a real job. I think I was never going to be a professional.
A lot of developers are ex-musicians, Jeff. A lot of people that we've had on the show, Kirk, like front-end UI devs. It's uncanny that they were ex-musicians. Like, I don't know if the right guy, I never wrote a lick of music or played a chord or whatever, but does it correlate to writing a JavaScript front? Like, is it the same
it does actually. I was on the guitar the other day and I was trying to what was I had the guitar in a weird tuning and I was trying to play a song I normally played in another tuning, which is I'm not that good of a guitar player, but so it's always hard for me. But it was reminding me a lot of like dealing with computer design when I was trying to do that. Like when I'm just playing, it's different. There's just no obvious analogy, just the way the flow goes with computer programming. But like when you get to like certain states, to me, it definitely has a lot of analogy.
Mm-hmm.
I think so, because if we pull up an actual stat and we nerd it out and try to find and research data, I bet you I would say more than 70% of at least coders have some kind of musical.
Certainly our podcast guests. That's true.
100%. Yeah, it's insane.
And I kind of wonder, is it like, I don't know, because like obviously like music is a system to some degree, right?
Yeah.
So is a programming language, and it's just like as a musician, like you kind of have to just stop asking all these questions sometimes about like why certain things are like this. Like when you're playing the guitar, like why does this, skip from this to this? And like, I don't know, why is this B string here? You just kind of got to like accept it and just move on. And I do feel like that's like technology. Like, what's this method name? Oh, is it .includes or .contains? Like, I don't know. So you just have to accept the system for its own limitations and just keep on making something.
But anyway, that's awesome. Those are great hobbies, and definitely could nerd out more on the van life stuff too, Kirk. But I just want to say, man, this was fun. Thanks for being on the podcast and everything.
Yeah, we both learned a ton.
Yeah, I was really happy to be on it and chat with you guys. Again, it's been great all the time we've worked with WP Engine, and this was awesome.
Yeah, dude, definitely appreciate it. And we'll definitely put some links to your different Cloudflare products. And if there's any other like links to your site or anything else you want us to include in the show notes,
send them to us.
Yeah, send them to Fran, and we'll make sure they get out.
Sure they're in.
Promotionally. Sure. And if you've got a Twitter or anything, or LinkedIn, we'll put it on there and tag
you. Can put my LinkedIn on there. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kirk. It was definitely a pleasure meeting you. Super gracious for your time, sir.
Welcome. Great to meet you guys.
Cheers, y'all. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for tuning in to the Headless WP podcast. If you liked today's episode, go ahead and give us a share or a like on whatever platform you're listening on. And be sure to keep in touch with the WP Engine Developer Relations team on Twitter, Discord, or through our website. Thanks for listening.